Does anyone else take trips to the fridge or pantry almost every hour? That's me. I'm always thinking about food, but I hardly ever think about where my food comes from. Obviously the grocery store, but beyond that, I have no idea how my food gets sourced, processed, or transported. I don't know if it's organic, if it's produced ethically, if it's accessible to all people, or if it's harvested and transported sustainably. These are all questions I obviously don't have the answer to, but questions that something called food sovereignty can help us address. So today we're gonna talk about the idea of food sovereignty, and to help us understand it better, we'll be talking to agroecologist and climate advocate Alexa White.
Food sovereignty is really about being culturally connected to the food that we're growing and the food that we're eating. And in order to do that, we should recognize the personhood and the humans that are allowing us to have that.
First things first, what is food sovereignty?
Food sovereignty is essentially how people, nations, and states have the right to their food, have the right to define what agriculture and food policy happens surrounding their food. So that can begin with farmers and how the food is produced, to how the food is transported, and then what it looks like when it comes to your table.
So from planting a seed to eating a banana for breakfast, food sovereignty makes sure every step of the food process is as fair and sustainable as possible. And to achieve such fairness, food sovereignty is broken down into 6 pillars. The first one is food for people. This one is simple, producing food that's healthy and accessible to all people and communities, no matter the region they live in or their socioeconomic status. Food sovereignty is actually a major issue in the international agricultural debate, and is also a big part of the ongoing fight for racial justice. Since food justice is intertwined with a history of structural racism that in many cases marginalizes and impacts people of color in the farming sector.
I personally would say that these issues are definitely affecting Black and brown bodies in general throughout the world. Demographically, people of color are definitely most affected, considering the people who grow our food. And when I say our, I mean the people of the world. And then geographically, nations of the global south are definitely most affected by this. So when I say global south, I'm pretty much identifying lower income countries. So those in South America, those in Africa. These people are definitely most affected, mostly because of how much food actually comes from these lands.
Number 2 is valuing food providers, so respecting the rights of the farmers who harvest and produce our food, and making sure that policies are not taking advantage of them or jeopardizing their livelihoods. You would think that farmers would have rights over their production in the first place, right? Unfortunately, this power often falls in the hands of corporations, governments, and market institutions that decide all current international trade, finance, and investment policies. A perfect example of this is the farmers in India who have been protesting their government against the corporatization of agriculture and their right to food sovereignty since August 2020. The government isn't giving the power to the farmers. In reality, they're giving the power to the corporations who will decide what's hot and what's not, and how much to charge for it.
Essentially, the demonstrators are demanding that the Prime Minister repeal the recent farming laws where there is a minimization of the government's role in agriculture, and it provides more space for private investors to kind of emphasize and grow that industrial agricultural setting. So essentially, they're fighting for food sovereignty.
Number 3 is localizing food systems. This gives both producers and consumers the control to decide how they want to sell or buy their food, meaning organic foods from a local market and not GMO food from corporations. Number 4 is making decisions locally. Similarly, this also gives food producers control over their own crops, but more on how they decide to graze their land, water the crops, and conserve their livestock, basically giving them the option to be more sustainable in their own way.
A lot of my work is trying to figure out what we can do in response. We already have those solutions. So if you look at small-scale farmers, so by small-scale farmer, I mean a farm that is less than 2 hectares, up to or equal to. Most small-scale farms, they're usually owned by families, they're growing multiple crops, they have a lot of forest edge, and their practices align with what we would ideally want to be aiming towards if we were to have a sustainable future in farming.
Number 5 is building knowledge and skills. Food sovereignty allows farmers to pass down generational knowledge and harvesting practices, rather than force food providers to adapt to expensive and threatening technology like genetic engineering. And last but not least, the sixth pillar of food sovereignty is working with nature. So basically finding the harmony between agriculture and ecological processes that improve the conditions of the planet, especially during a climate crisis. The land we use to grow crops and raise livestock is responsible for approximately 1/4 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, and it's mostly because current industrial agricultural practices are not sustainable. A lot of large-scale farming is dependent on oil, which is used in fertilizers, pesticides, and heavy production machinery. Then there's global distribution systems that contribute heavily to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. And if we keep farming like this, it'll just contribute to more climate change, which in turn will impact harvest yields. You get it. It's just another vicious cycle.
Essentially, if we were to think about agriculture as it exists through time, we are currently in a corporate food regime. And so what I mean by that is that a lot of the ways that agriculture can be characterized today would be through agricultural intensification. And so that's where you see a lot of monocultures, a lot of pesticides being used, a lot of land being cleared out.
So too long didn't read. The idea of food sovereignty is just trying to heal the planet and reject industrialized production methods, which only contribute to the climate crisis. But as Alexa said, we already have the solutions. A lot of local farmers are already practicing sustainable farming. Things like managing water wisely, avoiding toxic chemicals, promoting biodiversity, and overall strengthening nearby ecosystems. It's just a matter of leaving the idea of industrial agriculture behind and embracing more sustainable agricultural practices in our respective communities. Organizations like the United Nations, Via Campesina, and Black Food Sovereignty Coalition are investing time and resources into fighting for food sovereignty. But if you want to try and get involved, here's what you can do. Start by supporting your own community and buying from local farmers and supermarkets that hold high standards for fair treatment of workers and care for the environment. Or support food justice organizations led by people of color. Organizations like Soulfire Farms have reparation maps that lead you to food and farm projects organized by people of color that need support. But the easiest way to start working towards food sovereignty is to just think about what you're having for dinner tonight.
I would say to anyone who wants to get involved in these sorts of discussions to look at the food that you're eating for dinner, the kinds of things that you do in your everyday, just paying attention to exactly where your food comes from, how you're getting your food, and what your food really means to you will link you kind of culturally and factually into exactly what I'm talking about on a global scale.